And welcome to the Podcasters Row. This is King of Podcasts. Thanking you for listening to another episode with us. Podcaster yours truly has been around for almost 19th year in podcasting, talking to other fellow podcasters. And today we want to go and talk with a professional. Boy, talk about some credentials that make me feel so small. He is a professional jazz and classical pianist, studied the Oberlin Conservatory of Music and Georgia State University. He has led a celebrated jazz trio for the last 10 years in Atlanta before transitioning to become a music educator. There's so much more to that, but I'm here right now with the creator of Truer MU and the Truth About Music podcast, or the podcast called Musician and Transition. I'm here with Adam Cole. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm sure people will say this if they hear your name, that if you do a Google search for Adam Cole, they might get you confused with a professional wrestler out there that is quite viral and popular. But there's a different side to you, Adam. But it's a very common name. So
God, I would love to have that guy on my show.
There you go. It could be a bad idea, right? But with that said, you have the show here, and to go ahead and talk about music, it's always been kind of difficult, always notice, for people to do music podcasts because of the fact of, if you're not able to incorporate and hear the music in between, or if you have copyright issues, things like that. I can always imagine where what you do is you're talking with people for their musical journeys from beginners to pros, and also you have some famous people that have been on as well. The onus of the initial origin of the podcast, talk to me where it came from.
Well, I have a school of music, and at some point, me and my partner were talking about having our instructors on, doing, short instructional, videos of our instructors, like tell us where you came from, tell us how you got to be a guitar teacher. And, I did a few of these videos with our teachers. And then I realized when the pandemic hit and I needed something to do, that I could actually do this with anyone, that I could actually interview anyone, not just my teachers. And so I started to think about who I wanted to interview. I started to interview friends of mine who are musicians. And then I got these ideas that maybe I could reach out to some people who are maybe a little more famous. And I reached out, and some of them responded positively. And so next thing I know, I'm talking to all sorts of people and I'm interviewing them, and I'm good to go.
So when you talk, how into the weeds do you go into talking about chord structure or arrangements or sheet music, things like that?
Well, I like to go as deep as the guest wants to go. However, I am quick to help the audience understand a point that they don't necessarily get. For instance, when I was recently talking to Dr. Gordon Vernick, that was my last interview. He's a jazz musician and he plays the trumpet, and he was talking about how the trumpet doesn't sound like a saxophone. Like, he likes to do saxophone lines on the trumpet. And so I said, well, okay, that's a great point. Could you show us the difference between a trumpet line and a saxophone line and how you make it sound like that? So I try to take it as deep as I can, but also protect my audience, if that makes sense.
And with that, have you been, when you talk about famous people that you've had on, who's overwhelmed you that you kind of almost went like a fan proper, and you were really, you kind of might have had a struggle to get through that guest and that interview because of how popular they are?
Well, a couple of the interviews that I was really thrilled to get, one of them was Liberty DeVito, who's played drums with Billy Joel forever. That was terrific. He came on the show not once, but twice. The second time he came on with Billy Joel's first drummer, Reese Clark, who's played with Hoyt Axton and with a number of other people, had a huge career, and they talked to each other in front of me. So that was probably one of the best. I had Sean Mullins on, and we did a fantastic interview. Yep. Tom Wehrman, who produced 3 of the famous Cheap Trick albums, came on, and he came on twice as well. He wanted to come back and talk some more, so we went head to head with a number of albums that he had done besides Cheap Trick. So yeah, Mother's Finest came on, and we talked about their careers and their histories. Greg Geller came on, who signed Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe. Bob Merlis came on, who's been publicity manager for John Mellencamp, not Cougar, for a long time. So it's been a lot of folks have come on, and it's been a lot of fun.
Adam, I want to talk about the landscape of music now, the mainstream. So what popular culture is today, current day, And when you look at what you've done through the various music circles, you've worked from classical to rock to jazz to being a singer songwriter. But some of those aspects, I mean, how many young people are still picking up a guitar, picking up a saxophone, playing a piano, taking the lessons, learning to hone the craft and be able to perform live on a stage when you're going up against all these people that are using, recording studios, and they can use, voice, they can use auto tune, or they can use various effects to replicate instruments. The part where technology is constantly replacing traditional instrumental playing of rock, jazz, classical, or what have you.
Well, I'm not actually sure what the data is on that. I mean, I have seen is in my work as a teacher, students still playing drums, still playing guitar, still playing, we teach these kids. I have a studio full of kids learning to play the piano. So I think the issue is that you don't necessarily see so much of this maybe in popular culture, on the radio. The hits are all electronic mostly. Maybe there aren't as many bands on the radio as there used to be, but if they're out there, kids are doing it, adults are doing it. So I think maybe, this genre of music exists not in the mainstream, but it may be that there are more people doing it than not.
Right. Well, for instance, there's been particular genres that have been put by the wayside. Right, rock music we don't hear as much anymore. You hear changes to, even country music now, just where while we have technology that has allowed us to discover a lot more music, but how much of it comes to the very top that that a mainstream audience can go ahead and enjoy and listen to? The thing is, I mean, if you want to see an act and they're seeing someone performing on stage in front of a large audience, you're not seeing them playing behind instruments or playing with a band anymore. It's a lot of solo artists out there these days. It's really, yeah, it's not the part where I'm talking about where if you're going through and hearing you're much more cultured, but it is something about that mainstream culture that's out there, pop culture, that is we used to have a lot more people playing instruments, but you don't see it as much anymore. It's kind of more underground. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. But I mean, there are bands all over the city of Atlanta where I live, and they are playing. So, I mean, these things exist. And the fact that they may not be mainstream doesn't bother me so much because, right. I mean, maybe that's not who I'm after. I mean, I'm looking for the people that are interested in learning more about what's going on with music. And if you wanted to have a band, how could you start a band? And if you're in a band, how can you make that band work? And, maybe okay, so you're not going to make millions and millions of dollars. Maybe that day is past, but you're still going to have a great time. Or are you? How can you do it? And if you wanted to try to make $1 million with a band, is it possible? Has somebody done it? Oh yeah, this guy over here did it. I interviewed him, or he's trying to do it, or she's trying to do it. How are they trying to do it? So there's plenty to talk about still.
Agreed. It's just, I'd love to know where it used to be before we had so much with the internet to really disrupt our lives, that it was a lot easier for people to go and just explore different kinds of music, to explore classical music and people different, playing performances, going to, an event and going to a small bar or going to a club or going to a venue where you could just hear live music, that it doesn't have to be just, somebody as a cover band. There's the appreciation for jazz, for classical, for rock music, for, various music that's out there, that if it's more accessible and much more available, and for more people to really be involved, understand the messaging, the real intricacies of performing. I mean, I think it's I just feel like that from a wide world view, I feel like sometimes it's a bit lost unless you're really looking for it.
Well, I mean, maybe our expectations, it used to be in the old days, everybody watched the Super Bowl, and when, everybody went to the bathroom at the same time, there was a huge water shortage because there was a commercial on. Those days are gone. Everybody's not watching the same sports, the same shows. There are too many of us. That was back when there was maybe 1 billion people in the world, and now there's 8. As we get bigger and bigger, if we survive, we can expect smaller and smaller subsets of populations to be going along. And it's fine, I think, for us to find our niches, and as a podcaster, if I'm lucky, I'll get a couple of million viewers. That'd be great, but that's still just a couple of million out of the billions that are watching. That's okay. Why do I need billions of people to watch me? I'd be satisfied with a couple 100,000 who really, really care about what I'm talking about. So this subdivision of the world, it's always been around, but I think now it's harder to hide because there's just too many people and too many directions to go. I don't think it's a cause for concern. I think it's just the way the world is going.
Okay. Talk to me about the time that you have available to go ahead and do the work, because obviously you're doing your work yourself, educating, performing, whatever else you might be working on as a musician or being a musical educator. You've done it for 3 decades and you've gone through here. What was it about the chance of using the YouTube channel to go ahead and have these stories brought to life, and the common questions that you have, that the real exploration of what you're looking for when you get to each interview?
Yeah. I tend to find I'm really interested in the person I'm talking to. I often want to know where they came from. How did they get here? How did you get here is a question I like to ask them, because it gets them talking about themselves and you get to see who they are. They get excited. My favorite thing I like to do is have them say, that's an interesting question. Then I know I've won. I'm like, yes, I've got you to think about something or answer something you haven't ever answered before. That's great. Maybe we're going to learn something that you've always wanted to tell people. This is really what I'm after. These are the kind of questions I'm after. Like, can I find what the story is about you? What do you really care about? Oh, you're a musician, but you really love to fix up old cars. All right, let's talk about old cars, and is there anything about old cars and music? I think that was Bob Merlis we talked about. He had a love of old cars. And so, even though he's a publicist for ZZ Top, I was like, let's go to old cars. Let's talk about old cars, and it was fun. And he lit up and we talked about that. And there is a connection between his love of music and his love of old cars. We were able to talk about that. So, it's fun for me to just ask random crazy questions and go deeper, because people, I think, will get turned on by the conversation. They get to sit there and be a part passively of this really good conversation. And who doesn't want that?
So everything is encompassed by the origin of TruerMU, TRUERMU, which you deem it as giving performers the best possible information about the world of music, its challenges, its triumphs, and its lies. So while you put that all together, you are targeting towards performers and those that would be interested in being a part of the music business in terms of the creation of music.
Well, not only people who want to be in the music business, but also people who feel like they'd like to know more about the music business. People who just wish when they sat down at a concert, they didn't feel stupid. Like, oh, I wish I knew what a chord is. I wish I knew, how they wrote a hit, but they don't want to ask. They're afraid they're embarrassed. So, it's for anybody that wants to know more than they already know, really. If you want to know more about how to be a pro, there are interviews for that. If you want to know more about how movies have music put on them, there's interviews for that. It's really all the answers to the questions I always wanted to know.
Now, the way we consume music today. So a good 20 years ago, that all started to change. Physical units on how we listen to music, whether it was if it's not live music, we want to hear it recorded. If you wanted to hear it on vinyl or 8-track or cassette or whatever there was, or CD, and now most recently where everything is all digital. It's wonderful, don't get me wrong. We're hearing it now seamless and more high definition than ever, and more remastered than ever. But for those that want to get into this and make it a lifetime and be able to support themselves by playing music, for the rest of their lives, I feel like it's gotten much more difficult because of what you can publish, who will publish it for you, and how much you can make off the publishing or performing live and getting the word out there to listen to your music. Talk to me about the changes you've seen, about the evolution in the time that you've been recording the podcast, and also in your career. You've been a part of all that transformation. You've seen it all happen in front of you.
Yes. I mean, shoot, let's just talk about the last 3 years, with AI coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, in my time over the last 30 years, I've seen things go from a music industry, which, may have been suspect in how ethical it was business wise, but did make money for its people, to a music industry that with when we switched to CDs and then MP3s and file sharing, that industry sort of fell apart. And then it became more about streaming. And then of course there's a DIY thing where everybody started to be able, like with GarageBand, you can create quite a sophisticated sound with very basic tools. You can create some stuff and you can immediately share it with the whole world. I have like 9 albums out myself on iTunes and Spotify and all of that, just of my songs. And I can do that. Couldn't have done that 30 years ago, but there's so many more people doing it that, there's not room for me. But now it's even worse because people that write mediocre songs and, put them out will now have to compete with AI making mediocre songs. So there won't even be room for DIY mediocre anymore because AI is going to take all of that. Anybody will just ask Chat GPT to write a great, Billy Joel type song for them, and they'll maybe put a little change in it to, protect themselves. And the market will be flooded with all the same type of sounding stuff.
It's all disposable. I say a lot of new music today is disposable. I go through and I curate 4 playlists on Spotify of all various music. And there's one list that, okay, maybe I hear some songs that I hear after 3-6 months. Yeah, I drop them because I just, and it's not like I'm going to jump into another list that I want to hold on to, listen to it again. No, it's just a lot of songs currently today. They don't hold the test of time anymore.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there's tons of songs that were written like that 50 years ago, 70 years ago. There's always a vast amount of songs.
Some of the thought process now with musicians today, they want to go and sell their publishing catalogs, or there's the thought, well, you can't create anything else new. If you're a guitarist that you've already done with 3 chords, you can only do so much with 3 chords or whatever it is. And it's like, but there is much more creativity left out there. Talk about what you talked to with your guests about fostering creativity and realizing there are messages that are still out there to be played and performed to touch the hearts and minds of people that are listening.
Sure. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Because if you're interested in making money, writing, a book that'll sell or a song that'll sell, AI will help you with that. It'll make a very acceptable sounding product, acceptable looking product. And, people will continue to buy that until they start recognizing that it's all the same. And maybe like McDonald's, it's not satisfying to them.
Yeah.
All the while that's happening, it is going to be possible for people to genuinely express themselves if they know how. This is the key. People are going to want perhaps to write music, not because it's going to make them money, but because it connects them with other people, maybe 5 other people, maybe 500 other people, maybe 50,000 other people.
Yeah.
There will be room for those people. And so how do you do that? How do you write those songs? How do you get out there? The questions are not going to go away. There will be a small pocket of room for these people who do the work, And in my case, I've striven to create a sound that is very rough, that could never be confused with AI because it's just too rough and raw.
Right.
And whereas I think that may have hurt me over the last 10 years because it sounds so rough, I think in the future, when everything sounds so polished, people are going to be like, AI never could have wrote that. That's just too rough.
Right. But now we're at the point where I also don't see anyone that's coming out, and I have a media podcast I talk about music all the time on. If I wanted to discover new music, I need somebody to kind of tap my shoulder. Hey, you should listen to this. Why don't you listen to check this out? It's one of those things where we all learned. We had people I like to call tastemakers. So in radio, if you had a progressive rock station, they would tap you into like, here's some other music you never heard before from another country or another genre you never heard before. And they would really open your eyes up because there was a time before, if you called something progressive, music progressively was various genres, various fields that would include jazz, blues, rock, and just reggae and everything else. And they were not segmented into genres like we have today. But my thing is, most importantly, is if there's something new out there to appreciate and to notice, in America, it's very tough to find tastemakers, to find those people that new music discovery or to discover music you never heard of before. I mean, It's funny where like sometimes, some of the rock music that's out there, and I see young kids that are wearing like rock band shirts. I'm like, well, do you even know where they're from? Have you ever heard their music before? And I'm like, the Nirvana shirts, like, what? They were around for a while, but like the shirts are more important than the music. I'm like, what did happen there? That's the part where I feel like I wish there was still room, and I don't know if there's room for it because the music companies are all worried about grabbing royalties from wherever they can, but nobody's worrying about radio has lost the onus of being the tastemaker. And the algorithms of Spotify and Pandora and Apple can only do so much. So where do we get people to go and appreciate and explore new music and derive them to that direction?
Well, actually, I did have a conversation with a radio executive, one of my shows. We talked about those very things, and he made it quick to point out that he does believe there's still room for radio, and that radio does serve a place in a community that ties people together in a local area. It talks about local interests, local radio, local news, local weather, local things of note. And while it's doing that, it is also talking about music. So I don't know to what extent the radio is doing a great job of this, but it still exists, the power of radio to influence. And as far as the rest of it goes, one of the things I would like to be able to do is influence people's choices and say, hey, listen to these people, listen to these albums from about 40 years ago. There's plenty of people doing that. Listen to these albums from 40 years ago, these songs from 50 years ago. They're great. You might enjoy that. There's still places for taste making to occur. I don't think we need to despair just yet.
Oh, no, I think, well, it's just that it's not as accessible. Well, it's not always point of mind to me. Like I remember there was a story from January this year. Elias Light and Billboard talked about public radio and a number of stations that are playing new singles and trying to go ahead and get word out there and let people notice. So there's, WXPN, KXP, KUTX, these stations that are in Seattle or in Philadelphia and other markets, but it's not where people are catching it from everywhere. And that's the whole thing. I just wish that there were certain shows or certain platforms that were very wide ranging that would let people just really appreciate all this, because part of it is public radio's. I wish public radio could be more of that and less talk, because I think there's just more where we could get more out of what was there, because commercial radio is not going to give that to us. We need those areas that will explore different culture to open up to us, and that's one of the places I would think of. And that we get that for the public radio and public television. I wish there was more of that. What do you think?
It's a good point. I don't know. I mean, of course, NPR with their Tiny Desk concert, contest, which
it is great. It is great, but it can't do it every day.
Well, and I entered the contest this year, and there were 6,000 entries.
Oh,
so I mean, even if you wanted to get a taste of different music, I mean, I tried to watch as many of those as I could. I think I must have watched 150. It was just not possible to watch all the different things going on, and so you definitely feel like you're missing out. I mean, I think to some extent they're trying to do that. It's a great question, where this impetus is going to come from that is going to guide people to stuff they might like. And again, I guess it falls back on the question of, is there ever going to be once again, a kind of a large thing, or is it just going to be whatever niche you're in? People are going to guide you in your niche to things.
Right.
Maybe it's just going to end up being more of a web than it is going to be an umbrella. And maybe that's just how it's got to be. I don't know.
It's part of where we'll listen. I mean, the technology that we have out there allows us to open up our minds and our ears to so much now. So the kaleidoscope of music there is out there, I could never get enough time to go to and then really we get, millions and millions of songs every year added to platforms, but there's no time for us to get. But if we had somebody that could go ahead or at least some places where we can go ahead and get to that music discovery, I want to have a place for that. And if it's newer music, I want to give those people a chance, because the other thing too is one of the artists I remember talking to on a podcast. There's a lot of artists that I'll see. TikTok is always a great place to go and find music. And that's one of the few places that's really music discovery, to the point that they're creating their own streaming app. They're also working with record companies, like Warner Music. They just did a deal now to set up royalties. They're not going to be a lump sum. They're actually going to get paid proper royalties. The rates are going to be set just like anybody else. So that's great. And I think TikTok is going to be one of those places that's going to grow themselves to that. And there's more than enough artists out there that I see that, okay, they're taking songs, covering it, and just replicating, or singers that are out there replicating music they heard before. But one of the artists I talked about the fact that, for those, you don't have to keep doing covers. Please write new music, write new lyrics, let's hear what you got. Like, we already know that you're well grounded and you're very talented, but let's add more to the ether. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think in that regards is I think it's a shame that there's maybe two or three people that are writing all the songs that are on the radio. I mean,
Yes.
that's a place to start. I mean, okay, so I wouldn't mind if there were just 50 people writing all the songs on the radio. As elite as that would be, it's better than finding out that there's two or three people writing all the songs. I mean, come on. Lots of us can write. I mean,
Yes.
and
No, and there's
so
a
I
lot,
mean,
and when it comes to radio, which is a medium that is severely underappreciated, these big corporate companies that have taken over all these stations and they program them the same way. I hope for a day. I'm a radio person at heart. So for me, it was the fact that playing music out there that other people are getting a chance to hear. And I want to play the same playlist as everybody else. I want a large, wide ranging, expanding playlist and try everything. I would
Yeah.
love radio to have all these different formats, and even streaming only goes so far. So
Right.
I would love to have it where, well, first of all, I hope that the corporate companies, and their debt and they hold on to by private equity groups, that's another story, that they'll implode someday. And that there will be actual owners that will be able to create radio stations to create music or to play music that hasn't been heard and just be something different. But we don't have that.
When I was a kid, Atlanta radio was really good back in
Yeah.
the 70s and early 80s. And I do remember, even though they were all hits, I mean, they were all hits and somebody filtered them. So there was lots of great
Yes.
music you weren't hearing. But I was listening on Top 40 radio to light country, it wasn't deep country, but it was light country, Kenny
Right,
Rogers.
right.
I was also listening to Earth, Wind and Fire on the same station,
Yes.
and Robert Cray and, and the Cars. All these acts were on the same station in the
Right.
same shows. That actually was great for me. I mean, I still listen to some of the same music today that I heard back then because I was introduced to it. And, I mean, my kids have the benefit of being forced to listen to a lot of the music that I play at home. So they've had some of that. But I think a lot of people really, music has just become wallpaper for them because that's all they can use it for. They aren't getting stimulated, so they use music as just a vibe. And it really doesn't matter what it sounds like as long as it doesn't interfere with their brain process.
Right. But I'll tell you what, that's when we used to have, when the format for contemporary hit radio was called Top 40. And it was just the top 40 songs, not you control what the 40 songs are. The most popular songs bought, sold, and listened to. That was the meter. And that's what we had. I mean, and you think about 70s, 80s. I mean, look at all the genres we had, from reggae to soul to pop to, and then all these different international formats that would come into play as well that we would never hear about before. That's the part where there's something about, if something becomes popular and all of a sudden, okay, here it is, and then people get a chance to explore new music. I just like the idea where you don't have to go and dig deep to find great music, that sometimes something will just pop up and all of a sudden, here we go. Hey, Billy Joel is a great example. You mentioned the, two drummers that came on. Well, I'll tell you what, today, sure, you might hear We Don't Start the Fire. You might hear, Piano Man or whatever of his big, huge hits he has to play all the time at concerts. But you know what? I also noticed air checks from the 70s. And one of the songs I never heard of, but it was played on the radio in New York, Zanzibar. What a great record. And the jazz player in the middle set playing out twice. What a wonderful song. One of my favorite Billy Joel songs now. But it was played at WPLJ in New York. I'm like, progressive rock station. You give me music that's also like, okay, it's not what the record companies are telling you got to play, or, what all these corporations are going to try to control and downsize. No, wide ranging, and let the people select what music is popular. So I've always said, go back to a top 40 format. Listen, Casey Kasem, for all those years, he counted the 40 top songs of the Billboard Hot 100, not what they do today, where it's just this, curated list. That's nothing of what the top 40 is. Because if you look at the Billboard today, it's totally different. And it's still, you have country, we have Spanish music, we have everything. And if something that is from a different genre comes into play, it's novelty, but guess what? People learn about it.
Yeah.
I want more of that. I want that gateway to go ahead and go all the way down the rabbit hole and to find some really great music. And I think that would really be of among the people that you might have on the show, or others. That's how you discover great music.
I'm totally in agreement with you. And the power of hearing a song more than once is not to be underestimated. There's lots of songs, massive hits today, that only are massive hits because they were played more than once.
Right.
Because people heard them a number. At first, Captain Jack, what is that song? But now everybody can sing it. So I mean, I'm totally in agreement with you. It would be a lot of fun to have that. And it would be good for us as a country, I think, too. With the polarization we've got going on, we have very little in common with other groups of people now, and it's very difficult and dangerous. So to have at least music in common might make a big difference.
Music makes go around, and I'll tell you, if there was more music going on that people were listening to, make people happier, make them just feel emotions and feel different senses. And it would be wonderful to have more music out there that really just that puts power to a message, emotional components, makes you have great memories. All of that is wonderful. And, going through a lot when it comes to, like, I had family members that passed away, and my mother passed away a year ago. And I'll tell you, music has been one of those drives that, like, every day, a couple of hours a day working out, or just when I have time just to go ahead and spend time just to listen in, I'll drop a Spotify in, I'll just listen to a playlist, and I'll find something that I'm just going to enjoy.
Yeah.
Music is still important to me. And, that's part of the reason I even got into the business of radio and now in the podcasting, is because music was so important growing up. And there's so many great songs that will always make me think of something that puts a smile on my face, always. So
nice.
Adam Cole, again, Truer MU, and again, the Musician and Transition Podcast. Real quickly, I know the YouTube page, you just go look for, when I go looking for it, but the only thing I was trying to go and find out, first of all, to direct everybody to where to find your content, acole.net, ACOLE.net is a great place to go. I was trying to go and find out where exactly I can find the Musician and Transition Podcast. Is there a particular audio set, or is all your podcasts on YouTube?
Okay, so at the moment, the podcast is in process. So I'm just getting that going. So if you haven't found it yet, perhaps by the time this airs, people will be able to see it. But the interviews are all on the YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you search for TRUERMU, you'll immediately come up on that channel, Truer MU. Also, if you search, like I said, if you go to acole.net, there is a page that has the video channel on it. And you can go immediately to the playlists, and you can see all the different topics and all the different people that you might not have run into otherwise.
Fantastic. And so there's a whole catalog of great people that you talk on there on the program. Various people from authors, musicians, creatives, people that have worked with some great bands that, if they go out touring, they're making some good money out there. So the touring part is also really good. There's a lot of great groups out there that are still touring today, and that's where all the money is right now when it comes to music these days. So Truer MU, and then give me the website for Truer MU.
So if you the YouTube channel, if you go search in YouTube for TRUERMU, it should take you right to the YouTube channel. And if you can't find it, www.acole.net, and then you find the link to video, and you should be able to go right to it from there.
Yeah, I look right on the MIDI and I can find the video page right there. Perfect. Adam, really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. This was really inspiring, and I hope that this continues, and keep the word about music, because we need more people to explore, and it can't just be all this digital stuff that we're getting that's disposable. People need to go back and listen back to centuries and centuries of music that's out there from us to be able to listen to, orchestrated or get to play it ourselves. So I appreciate you taking time out.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been fun.
Hey, my pleasure as well. So with that said, that's going to do it for this episode. But of course, you can find all previous episodes. Look for Podcasters Row at kingofpodcasts.com and all of my other programming. As also, I put music playlists up there as well on Spotify that I curate every week. So if you want to hear some of that, check that out for yourselves. And we'll talk to you next time.